Good morning. I'm sorry to get you up so early, but I know you weren't imaging all night, so I'm not feeling quite as guilty as I might otherwise. So my purpose today is to give you some ideas on ways that you can automate your system to make it work for you so that you don't have to sit there beside it every night that you want to image. And I'm going to try and stay out of the weeds and get into the nitty-gritty details because one of the things I'm going to talk about is Nina, and I could very easily put you to sleep talking about how to use the advanced sequencer in Nina. So I'll give you a high-level overview of those kinds of things. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my observatory, and but I'm not going to try and convince you to build one. So I'll give you some ideas. If you happen to have one, these are some things that you can do. And so my objectives today is that each of you would walk away with one thing that you say, gee, I'm going to go and try and do that. And it might be different for all of you, but if you get one thing out of it, then I will have considered it a success. So who is this guy? My name is Keith, and I'm an astro addict. I came to I came to Astro Photography quite late in life, actually. I started about 3 years ago. I was a photographer for as long as I can remember, and mostly into wildlife, a bit of landscape, and eventually I developed a fascination for Milky Way pictures and photographs of the aurora. And on one night in March of 2022, I was out trying to take aurora pictures, and Lady Aurora is a very elusive gal, and sometimes when she promises to show up, she doesn't. And on this particular occasion, the aurora was disappointing. And so I headed back home, carrying, in fact, that camera there with a 100 to 500 lens. And I thought, wow, there's a beautiful clear sky. That's the Orion constellation. I know there's a nebula in there somewhere. It should be around there. So I put the camera on a tripod and I fired off 10 shots of 10 seconds each. And I went home and researched to find out how you stack images. I found Deep Sky Stacker, and I could see the nebula. I couldn't believe it. So the next night I drugged the R5 and the same lens and a tracker and went out, and I managed to take that picture of the Orion Nebula. So that is my very first astrophoto. And that started a very long and very expensive journey. So eventually, you know the journey. First there was a mount, and then there was a scope, and then there was an ASI Air. So this is my driveway. I have a heavily treed lot, and it's a ravine lot. So we drop off about 45 or 50 feet right behind the house. So there's nowhere to image back there, so I image from the front driveway. And one of the significant features of our place is this pole here, of course, has a street light on it. So, so off to the north, we get just huge amounts of light. So night after night, I'd drag this trailer out and set it up with a tarp, and it wasn't quite high enough, so I'd put a piece of plywood on the top of it, and that was my shade in order not to have to deal with the stray light from the street light. And of course, if the skies were questionable, I wouldn't set up, and then I'd get up in the morning and find out that, geez, I could have got 4 hours last night. Why was I so lazy? And so on. So finally, in April of 2023, I started to build my roll-off observatory, because dragging the trailer out every night was getting tiring, and it was starting to attract the attention of the people in the neighborhood who knew that I was going to be setting up a telescope that night. So one of the interesting features here that's not immediately obvious is I went out at night and drove a stake where I was going to put this pier, and it was based on being in the shadow from that light that the pole created. so that I could get as dark as I possibly could. So that's how I positioned my pier. And so this is how it looks. You know, you don't need a window in an observatory because the roof is going to be open all night. So it's a fake window just to make it look pretty, and a flower box. And so I try not to make it look too objectionable. And I didn't realize when I started out, but building an observatory requires a ton of problem solving. So there's the, how am I going to get the roof open, and how am I going to close the roof, and what happens if it rains, and so on and so forth. So we're going to go through some of that today, but it's a game changer. I get protection from that pesky street light. I'm always polar aligned. I have 2 piers now. I always image with at least 2 scopes, and occasionally I'll set a 3rd one out on the driveway and image with 3 telescopes at the same time. In 2024, I managed to capture 787 hours of data. And all of that was done from the comfort of my office, except when I'm traveling, I can connect via VPN and run my systems from anywhere in the world. So if I had a decent internet connection here, I would definitely be running a scope home while I'm imaging from here. So just let me give you a glimpse into some of the things and how it works. Let's first of all talk about what I mean by automation. So to me, automation is performing an activity without intervention by the operator, except to initiate the activity. So I'm not aware of any way to balance a telescope on a mount automatically. So that's something that you couldn't automate, but you can automate focus, and you can use all kinds of devices to automate various things. And believe it or not, if you want to spend the money, you can automate tilt adjustments, and you can automate polar alignment, which are a couple of things that I don't do yet. There's lots of ways that you can capture data. I suspect that for most of you, this is the way that you set up, is a portable system on a tripod. These are my 2 systems in Arizona in February, and so I ran this way. You can go to a semi-permanent setup, which has some decided advantages. So you build some kind of a pier. These Todd Morden piers are popular with people. And you set up your mount, and then you either leave your mount out there all the time, or some people actually leave their whole system, put it under a good cover. You have to be aware of things like insects and moisture and condensation. So what a lot of people do is they put a gun-safe heater in under the cover, and there are people that just leave their gear out 365. Your own observatory, I mean, there's several ways you can set up an observatory. Mine's a roll-off roof. These domes are lovely. So your stuff is set up, ready to go. You're polar aligned. All you do is turn the power on, and away you go. And then the ultimate is you go to a remote observatory somewhere. This happens to be a photograph from Starfront. And you log in remotely, and away you go. And so all of these, to some extent, can be automated, but the further down the list you go, the more automation that you implement. So why do you want to automate? Well, it's you're going to shoot a lot more if you're automated. If I've got 2 hours and then it's going to cloud over, I don't worry about it. I set up, I start imaging. If the clouds move in, there's lots of nights I'll set up and get a half an hour of data, and then the clouds come earlier than expected, shut it down and call it a night. You can get much more consistent results because you're using the same routine night after night. There's not, oh, I forgot this, or that's not working, and so on. Your equipment is much more reliable. It saves you a ton of time setting up and tearing down, because I just don't do it. And, you know, especially at my age, human error is a factor, and you forget to do something, you forget to hook something up. We have a friend that left his Cat 6 cable in the grass last year, And so, you know, his Wi-Fi connection couldn't work and he couldn't figure out why. So there's human error. Scheduling imaging without having to be there is another major advantage. So lots of times if we're doing something at the club observatory, I'll set up my rigs so that they're ready to go, push the start button before I leave home. The roof opens at astronomical dusk, and the two rigs are imaging when I get back home. So automation has a lot of advantages. Automation needs some kind of a brain in order to make it happen. So there are lots of options. Probably these are the two most common, the ASI Air or some kind of a PC-based system. You can also use StellarMate, Astroberry, K-Stars, and probably a few others that I haven't even run across yet. So, but how many of you use an ASI Air now? Yeah, a good bunch. And anybody using PCs? Yeah, so about 50-50, and so we'll talk about both for a moment. So the Air the Air is a wonderful device. I started with it. I started out actually with that camera using backyard EOS on a laptop, and I used to get tied up in all the cables because every USB ran to the laptop independently and so on. And so eventually I bought an Air. I've used it for about 18 months initially, and after I built the observatory is when I decided to go to a PC and start taking advantage of those possibilities. But the Air is less expensive. You get power distribution, you get USB ports built right in. It's really simple to operate. You get a very easy learning curve, and it produces great images. And you can run it from a phone or a tablet. It's a good system. And with the ASI Air, you can slew to a target and autofocus, which is a game changer. You can do filter changes, control the imaging camera and the mount, and you can capture a couple of different targets in a night. So the Air is great. I had a chat with the ZWO folks and said, you know, are you open to suggestions how to improve the Air? And they said, yeah, we're taking a list. And I said, you need to introduce filter offsets. And I said, well, have a look. It's already on the list. So who knows? Maybe in a future revision of the firmware. So let's look at what you can do with a PC that you can't do with the ASI Air. So number one, there's no hardware limitations. You don't need to worry about staying in the ZWO domain. You can do a lot of things besides capture images, and I'm going to show you some of them. You can change settings that are not available within the ASI Air. Your guiding settings, you can tune a lot more guiding with a PC, and camera offsets, those kinds of things. You can fully control when to start and stop based on a number of different criteria. It uses the full version of PHD2 instead of the dumbed down version that's built into the Air. And so if you're having guiding problems, oftentimes you can make adjustments and solve them. You can use filter offsets, which I absolutely love. You can set up a custom horizon, and I'll show you what that looks like and how to do it. You absolutely get better Wi-Fi. So let's talk for a minute about what else you can automate using this system. So you can connect to all your equipment. You can start and stop at any specific times you like. Cool your camera. You can control your observatory equipment. For example, open and close your roof, rotate your dome, open your slot if you have a dome. You can monitor the weather, start, stop, pause, and restart imaging based on changes in the weather. You can issue alerts to yourself. You can use filter offsets, a wonderful addition that you can take advantage of. You can take flats. You can reconnect the camera in the event that you've had a download failure. You can copy images to your permanent storage location. And you can control a couple of systems, for example, at the same time. And I'll show you a picture of two telescopes on a single mount and two instances of Nina running and controlling the two systems in a synchronized manner. Plus you can limit, if you're taking a picture of you know, just something that's in the center of your frame or whatever, you can limit the region of interest so you get smaller files and they are easier to manage and easier to handle. So there's lots of PC imaging software. As I said, Backyard EOS is where I started. APT is used by a lot of folks. Sequence Generator Pro is a good system. Maxim DL, Voyager. And the one that I use is NINA. NINA stands for Nighttime Imaging in Astronomy. Okay, so you need some kind of a PC if you're going to go that route. These are a couple of examples of mini PCs that people use to control a system. Doing this does not require a fancy, expensive PC. Running NINA or any of the other ones is not processor intensive, so a small PC is more than enough. The one on the right, the Melee Quieter 3 or Quieter 4, those are fanless PCs, so they have a big heat sink in the top of them, and they operate on 12 volt. So a lot of people like those because they can mount them on their rig, plug everything in directly, and they don't have to have wires coming down off their system. The B-Links are a little bit larger. I should have probably brought one with me, but they're about that size. And they allow you to add additional NVMe drives and so on. You need good storage. In addition to the Astro Photography that we do, I also do solar imaging, and I ran my system yesterday. I accumulated in the afternoon probably close to 1 terabyte of data. So I have a 2 terabyte drive. You got to be real careful with solar because if you don't manage your data, you end up with a full drive very quickly. You will need a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor initially to get the PC set up. And one of the things that you need to do is to get it set up so that you can log into it remotely, and then you don't need keyboard, mouse, monitor. So the computer can sit out there all by itself. It runs in what they call a headless fashion. So if you go this route, you need to spend probably a day at least, and it can stretch into a couple of days, downloading software and getting it installed. NINA will not run on a Mac, so it needs to run in a Windows environment. If you're going to remote into it using Windows Remote Desktop, which is the software I recommend, then you need to have the Pro version of Windows on the small PC. Most of them come with Windows Pro installed, so there's no extra cost for that. You'll need NINA, you'll need .NET Runtime. If you want to have some kind of an application that you can see what's available in the sky at night, Stellarium or Carte de Ciel will work with NINA. You need the ASCOM platform and drivers for every device that you're going to connect. So filter wheels, EAFs, cameras, mounts, rotators if you've got them. You need ASCOM drivers for those things in order for them to be able to work. You need something that'll do plate solving. Most of us use ASTAP. There's a plate solver that has been developed by the people who make plane wave telescopes. It's called PlateSolve 3, and if you can find it right now, it's hard to find because they're developing PlateSolve 4, and so they're not making 3 openly available, but you can still find it, and it works exceedingly well. In particular, it works well if you're having trouble with star shapes. If you're using ASTAP, it works great if you've got good sharp stars, but sometimes if you're using something like an SCT and your stars aren't perfect, ASTAP will refuse to plate solve. So PlateSolve 3 works much better in those cases. You need PhD 2 for guiding. If you go with PowerBox, you need Pegasus Unity or the Wanderer Astro equivalent. Horizon file for Stellarium is something I'll show you. It works with NINA as well. And then you need the plugins that you're going to want to use. So you need to spend some time downloading and getting things set up. before you run the system, there are a few things that you need to do in order to manage the computer. The first one is that you need to you go into the BIOS for the computer. The manufacturer of the computer you buy will have instructions for doing this. You go into the BIOS when you boot the computer, and you go in and you change it so that when the power gets turned on to the computer, it immediately boots. So it doesn't require you to go out and push a button to start the computer. You turn the power on and the computer starts. So I have my computers connected to little TP-Link wireless switches, and so I can take my phone out from anywhere and turn the power on to my computer, and then 10 seconds later connect to the computer. So you need to set Windows so that it doesn't need a password or a PIN in order to start up. The problem is that if it comes up and you don't have a screen or a keyboard, you can't connect it sitting there waiting for you to put in your password. This is an important one. You need to set your hours of operation to something like 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. So Windows wants to update, and it assumes that you're using your computer from 9 to 5 and that you're sleeping at 2 o'clock in the morning, and so 2 o'clock in the morning is its favorite time to update. And after it updates, you know the routine. We're going to reboot your computer in 10 minutes. If you don't tell me not to. And boom, your imaging session is done, and you'll wonder why, because Windows ran an update. They're very unfriendly. So you go in and change the hours of operation, and you tell it, I'm working from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. You can have the computer from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So, and then a tricky one, if you go into Device Manager, one of the things that Windows has done in the last, I don't know, year or two, is they've started to worry about energy savings. And so if your USB ports are inactive, they'll power them down. And so you can go into Device Manager and select each USB port and turn that off. And I recommend that you do that because, for example, a rotator, you might start up and rotate to get the framing you want, and then your rotator will sit idle for hours. And then maybe halfway through the night, you move to a second target and you want to change the rotation. Well, it'll fail because Windows has turned off the USB port. So set those so that they can't be powered down, and then your devices will continue to operate. So if you are going to use a PC, you need some kind of USB distribution and some kind of power distribution in order to connect all the devices on your system. These are some options. These things blow my mind. I mean, at $460, they got to be one of the most overpriced devices in our hobby. So the Wanderer is quite good. The Pegasus works quite well. New to the market is the Svaboni ones, and I think they're only about $75, so they're a bargain compared to the other ones, but they don't have the features. There's no software, so you can't go in and turn devices on and off with the Svaboni ones. And they don't control 12-volt dew heaters. They do have outputs that will control a USB plugged dew heater, but not the 12-volt ones. And they don't have any kind of sensor to turn dew heaters on and off. So you set them and forget them. So you pays your money and so on. Just some general considerations. If you're going to set up and have a trouble-free operation such that you can go to bed and have some sleep, you need to make sure that it's set up so that you're going to succeed. Cable management is critical. You don't need cables getting snagged in the middle of the night. Number one, it'll mess up your sequence, but number two, it'll damage your equipment. Good clean contacts. Your devices sit outside under dewy conditions, getting wet. You get water into the contacts from time to time. I have a habit of taking contact cleaner and a Q-tip and going in and cleaning my contacts about twice about every 2 months, something along those lines. I highly recommend a fused power supply. You don't need to be burning wires up if you have a problem. And use good quality power supplies. I use a power supply that's 12 volts. Well, it actually puts out 13.5 volts and 30 amp capability. It's the device that a lot of the ham radio operators use for operating their ham radios from in the house. And if you start out with something that's putting out 12 volts at the plug on the end of the device, and then you connect it to 8 feet of 18 gauge wire or 22 gauge wire, lots of these things are, when it gets up to your camera, you may only have 11.7 or 11.6 volts, and cameras don't like to operate that way. So a lot of times people have camera disconnects and they can't figure out why it's not working. Very often it's poor power. So let's talk a little bit about Nina. It was originally written by Stefan Berg from Germany in 2016. He originally called it AP Buddy. It's free and it's open source, and it's currently being developed very actively. So it's not something that was produced and it hasn't been updated. It's being updated constantly. In 2022, they issued version 2, which introduced the advanced sequencer and the ability to use plugins, and that was a real game changer for Nina. One of the things that to me is really reassuring about Nina is if you go to the website I've listed there, they have excellent documentation, and there's written documentation for everything that you can and want to do in Nina, including for all of the plugins. And to me, that's indicative that they not only want the software to be able to work for you, but they want you to be able to work with the software. And so the documentation is very good. I've spent a lot of money on software that didn't come with any documentation at all. So this works quite well. And they have a very active and responsive Discord channel. And I've often gone in and asked a question in Discord and gotten response from the people who are the programmers themselves. So it's very well supported. The download site is there. And when you go to the download site, you may see 3 different versions available. They have what they call a nightly build or a nightly version, a beta version, and a stable version. The one you want is the stable version. There isn't always a beta, but when they're getting close to releasing another update to the stable version, then they'll come out with a beta so that you can try it for a while. I've run betas because there was a feature that I wanted to use and not had any problems. But the nightlies are likely to have bugs in them, and they tell you right up front. The nightlies are, if you're involved as a developer, you might want to use the nightly, but otherwise stay away from it. A word of caution, the Nina interface is very different than the Windows software, and it takes a little bit of getting used to. And the interface is highly customizable, so you can tune it to suit you and your tastes, but you can even do that accidentally. And so it can be a little daunting. The advanced sequencer in particular can be a little bit daunting, but you know what? There's a ton of help on the internet, and you take your time, a little bit at a time. You learn to do one thing and then move on to the next. This is what the Nina interface looks like, and you'll notice that there are kind of 2 lines across here, one there and one there. So it divides it into 3 sections. So the first section is the sequence start area. And so the things that you would put in there would be connect all my equipment to Nina, wait for nautical dusk and cool my camera, open the roof of the observatory if you're in that state, unpark your telescope and point it south so that you can autofocus, solve and sync the mount, set the rotation, and do your PHD2 calibration. Wait for astronomical dusk, slew to the target, and start your mount tracking. So those are typical things that you would include as instructions in the startup part of the sequence. The way that you do that is on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a whole bunch of instructions. And so all you have to do, for example, if you want to cool the camera, you take that cool camera instruction and you drag it and drop it, and bingo, it puts it into your sequence for you. So there's no writing programs. You don't have to worry about getting syntax errors or any of that kind of stuff. This is the business section of the Nina Advanced Sequencer. So this is what they call the Deep Sky instruction set. So you can see here that it shows you your target, the RA and deck coordinates, the rotation that you've told it that you wanted, and then down at the bottom is where you actually do your imaging. And so there are three sections there: triggers, loop conditions, and instructions. And so in order to image all night, you need to set up some loop conditions. And so what it does, Nina just repeats again and again and again everything that's in this section of your sequence. And so you might tell it, I want you to keep going as long as my target is above the horizon. I want to keep you to keep going until you reach astronomical dawn. I want you to keep going while it isn't cloudy. I want you to keep going while it isn't raining. And sometimes you might only want to collect 50 HA images before you move on and do something else. So you can tell it, I want you to go for 50 cycles. In the instructions would be things like taking your pictures. So, you know, take 4L, 2R, 2G, 2B, dither, copy the images over to my processing PC. And after each image, all of your triggers are evaluated. And what triggers do are cause an action to be taken based on some set of circumstances that you've identified. So one would be to restore guiding. You want a restore guiding trigger so that if you have, for some reason, lost a star or what have you, and you're not guiding, you don't go for the rest of the night without guiding. So it restores guiding. If it doesn't need to, it doesn't do it. Your meridian flip trigger is in here. Recenter the target. Your target can drift with time. Get it centered. You might trigger autofocus based on temperature, based on time, based on the size of your stars, and so on. A couple that I like is that I actually put my phone on vibrate, and I tuck it under my pillow when I go to bed, and I use pushover, and it will send, if there's an error, send a signal to my phone, and my phone goes bzz, bzz, wakes me up, and I go find out what's going on. So, and this bottom area is where we provide the instructions for the system to shut down. And so, not surprisingly, the kind of things we put in there: park your telescope, close the roof of the observatory, take flats for all your filters, warm your camera, disconnect the equipment, finish transferring the files to your PC in the house, turn off power to the equipment, and send a notification to the phone to tell you that it's done, and turn off the PC and be ready for the next session tomorrow night, hopefully. So let me try and bring this all together and introduce some of the devices that allow me to operate the way that I do, and just give you kind of a sense of how you can automate some things. So if I need to open my roof, I need Nina to interface with the middle device. Here is a USB connected relay board. And so the center 2, switch number 2 opens my roof, and switch number 3 closes my roof. And so if I change the switch setting in Nina from 0 to a 1 for switch 2, then it sends a signal to that motor, and the roof opens. The motor is a 12-volt motor that I stole from a walk-behind golf cart. I gave up golf in favor of Astro Photography. And so by reversing the polarity to the motor, it reverses the direction of the motor. I have a 5/16 aircraft cable that you can see there that wraps around a spool. and is connected to the roof at both ends. So when the motor turns one way, it pulls the roof open, and when it turns the other way, it pulls the roof closed. And so the end result my roof moves at a fair clip, but it certainly works well. Yes, and it moves that way in order to shade the streetlight, by the way, yes. So, same devices here, except I've introduced this thing at the top. That's an RG11 rain sensor, a Hydrion RG11 rain sensor. This thing will trigger a set of contacts with a single drop of water. And so if it rains, then I have in my sequence a loop while safe condition. If it rains, then I get an unsafe condition from the rain sensor, which then causes Nina to park my telescope and close the roof. And in this case, it activates switch number 3. The motor operates in the opposite direction and the roof closes. So let me show you how that works. So here we are, we're collecting images. You'll notice up where the circle is that conditions are safe. And I get water on my sensor. And as a result, the condition goes to unsafe, and it causes the telescope to go to its park position. You'll notice here, there's a little wired device. So that's a magnetic switch, and I have a magnet on this part of my mount which comes across and triggers the switch. My roof will not move unless my mount is in that position. So I'm not going to end up with the roof closing on top of the mount. Once it's parked, now the roof can close. And it sends me an instruction to my phone to say, I've shut your sequence down. So, I mentioned earlier that revision 2 of Nina introduced the ability to use plugins. Here's one of those places I could get off in the weeds very quickly, so we'll go through this pretty quickly. But if you're using things like an astrophysics mount or plane wave telescope and so on, a lot of manufacturers have come up with their own plugins to give you additional features within Nina. There's a target scheduler. Hocus Focus does a better autofocus routine, and it also has an aberration inspector in it that will give you an indication of back focus and tilt problems. People who like to have a tablet or a telephone interface, there's a relatively new plugin called Touch and Stars, which allows you to use your tablet. You have to have a sequence running, but once you do, you can then control it with your tablet.
These are some specific plugins that I would suggest you look at. 3-point polar alignment allows you to do the polar alignment of your mount even if you don't have a view of the pole.
Synchronization allows you to use a couple of telescopes on the same mount. Your filter offset calculator means you don't have to autofocus when you go from one to the other. So there are all kinds of these. Connector lets you connect your equipment from within a sequence or disconnect your equipment from within a sequence. So I don't have to have my fan sitting there running on my camera if I've triggered a sequence 3 hours before it's going to operate. I put the connector command in my sequence, and all those devices get connected, and then we carry on with the sequence. I use most of these. I use Robocopy to transfer my files so that when I get up in the morning, I don't have to sit and watch the files transfer. So here's 2 scopes piggybacked on a single mount, 300 millimeters and 749 millimeters. I used this setup for one of the entries into the imaging contest tonight. And they're controlled with the same computer, but running 2 different instances of Nina. One controls the small one and one controls the large one. but each of them have the synchronization plug-in enabled so that they synchronize. So I don't have my telescope dithering while the other one is sequencing. So dither commands are synchronized and autofocus commands are synchronized. So it's a good system. It works quite well. So I talked about the custom horizon. This is what that looks like. So this is a graphic that will show up in your sequencer, and it shows you what the altitude of your target is throughout the night. And so without the knowledge of your own horizon, you would think that you could let this sequence go until dawn. But you'll find that it runs down into the trees to the east, or to the west rather, of your place at about 3:30 in the morning, and so you either want to shut down then or introduce another target for a brief period of time. And the way that you set this up, it's a really simple text file. The left-hand column indicates the compass direction, and the right-hand column indicates the altitude in degrees. iPhone has an app called Theodolite Pro that allows you to do that. Android has a smart compass app that allows you to do that. Once you've set this up, you can also put that custom horizon file into Stellarium so that you get your own horizon when you're looking at a target in Stellarium. So let's spend a minute or two just talking about what can go wrong. So we've talked already about what if it rains, and you've seen the rain sensor operate. A first drop of rain will terminate the sequence, send me a notification on my phone, park the telescope, close the roof, and goes on to the remaining end instructions. So you probably noticed on that picture with the two telescopes, I have flats panels that allow me to take my flats as part of my sequence. So once the roof closes, then I take the flats for the filters that I used that night. So it doesn't rain, but the clouds move in. So there's a wonderful device that I avoided buying because they're about $500. And when I consider what they do, they're really quite a bargain. A Lunatico cloud watcher. And the way they work is they measure the temperature in the ambient air where the device is located, and they have this little infrared sensor. And it fires off an infrared, just like during COVID, people were measuring your temperature with an infrared thermometer. It's basically the same device. And it measures the temperature of the sky. And so if there are no clouds in the sky, the temperature of the sky is very cold. You have a large difference then between ambient temperature and sky temperature. If there are clouds in the sky, then the heat from Earth gets trapped and the sky temperature is considerably warmer. And so sometimes you have to tweak the adjustments in them for your particular area, but they're easy to set up. And so the way I've set mine up is if it gets cloudy, I close the roof and I monitor for a half an hour. If it clears up within the half an hour, roof opens back up and I resume imaging. And so that's for the case where you got a rogue cloud that goes across and you're good to carry on for the rest of the night. Frankly, I don't know if that's ever happened. I've got it set up to do, but typically what happens is it shuts down, waits for a half an hour, there's no change, and so it just proceeds to shut down. But what if the power fails? If a lightning strike X miles away takes out the power, what do you do? Well, one of the nice things about the Cloud Watcher is that it sends an unsafe signal to Nina as soon as it loses its power supply. So that triggers my sequence to end and the mount to park and the roof to close, as you've seen. The roof is operated from a 12-volt battery, which I operate using a marine battery with a trickle charger on it. So I use an uninterruptible power supply to power my mount, and the computer that controls it, so that in the event that the power goes out, the telescope can park and the roof can close and everything shuts down. Just a word of caution about safety systems. You saw me in that little video spraying water on the Hydrion rain sensor. I do that about 4 times a year. Get a sequence going, spray water on the sensor, and make sure that the roof closes. And I do the same thing with the power fail cycle. I get a little routine going during the daytime, and then I hit the breaker out to the observatory, turn the power off, and watch what happens. An untested system isn't an effective system. Just, there may be something not working properly. You need to make sure that if you're going to rely on it, that it's going to work. So when I'm not home, I use a Canadian VPN service called Tailscale. What they do is they assign a unique IP address to each of your computers that you register with them. And so this laptop has an IP address from Tailscale, and the devices I use for operating my system have Tailscale addresses. And so I like to think of it like the old-fashioned switchboard, where, you know, I want to call you and I call up Mabel and I need to talk to Fred. And so she takes a patch cord and plugs it from my telephone into Fred's telephone, and we chat away, and in the meantime she's listening in. So with Tailscale, it's essentially the same thing. Instead of connecting directly to that computer, you go to Tailscale, Tailscale goes to that computer, and then it's just like you're sitting there right beside it. The reason that you want to do that is you can open up a port for Windows RDP so that you can connect directly without having to use a VPN. Problem is that the port number that you have to open is widely known by all the bad guys out there, and so you're creating a way for them to get into your system and do all kinds of bad things. So much safer to do this. So I can connect to the observatory from anywhere and operate it as if I was sitting right there. It's nice to have eyes, and so I use these little WISE cameras with the infrared turned off. And so if it's time for the mount to slew, for example, I can watch on the camera and make sure that it's working. A couple of other things that are useful. These are the CASA Wi-Fi plugs. They're fantastic. So what I do is I put one of these on the 12-volt power supply for my pier and all of the equipment on the pier, and I put a second one on the computer, so I can power up the computer initially and set up my sequence and so on, and then power up the gear when it's time to connect. And they work really, really well, and you can operate them via your telephone from just about anywhere. These flat panels are terrific. They work, the Deep Sky Dad ones work both with the PC and with an ASI Air. You need a different cable to use them with the Air. They automatically cover and uncover your telescope, and as I said before, I take my flats as part of my sequence in Nina. So when I get up in the morning, I don't have to go out and put something on the telescope and take flats. No flip-flap device. I have a couple of large scopes that would need very large flip-flaps, and I don't want to put them on because I think it would make them susceptible to the wind. And so I use the other two relays on that relay board that I showed you before, one of them with a dimmer and one of them without. So I can turn one of these tracing panels on at high power for my narrowband images, and then through the dimmer at a lower setting for my LRGB. And so I use an A1 tracing pad that's on the wall. I slew the telescope to that position, record the Alt-Az coordinates, and then I build that into my Nina sequence. So with these larger telescopes, I reach the time I want to take flats, I slew to the panel, take my flats using switches 1 and 4, and when I'm done, I slew back to the park position. Just a couple of troubleshooting things. Probably the biggest source of problems is either poor USB connections or poor power connections. And it's worth spending money to buy good USB cables, and it's worth spending money to buy good power cables. I recommend 18 gauge power cables as a minimum. The little thin 22 gauge wires, the voltage loss is just too much with them. A good power supply, as I said before, proper drivers. Lots of times if you're having trouble, you disconnect, you reconnect, and it'll work fine. So these things have a mind of their own at times. You need to make sure that you haven't forgotten to connect the device to the software in the first place, which I've done. And it's really helpful to be able to power cycle an individual component. And so some of the power boxes will let you power cycle devices individually. This icon is for a piece of software called USB Tree View. And what it does is it shows you a listing of all the USB devices connected to your computer. And you can go in and right-click on the device and start it. And so sometimes if I'm having trouble connecting to a device, I'll reboot the device and boom, it connects and away it goes. So it's a wonderful little piece of software. So let's talk just for a moment or two here about remote operation. This is what my desk looks like most nights when it's clear. I do use Windows Remote Desktop, but there are others like AnyDesk, TeamViewer, Chrome Remote Desktop that work. Connection over the LAN is very easy, and I've already talked about Tailscale for when you're connecting away. Windows Remote Desktop is actually very good. Once you've connected, the experience is the same as if you were sitting right at the computer directly. And you can set up your monitor sizing and so on so that it matches the monitors that you're using. Typically what I do is in Nina you can set up the color scheme of what Nina looks like. One of the things I learned early on is if you're going to run two sessions at the same time, it helps if they have a different color scheme, because now you know that you're adjusting this computer versus that computer. Otherwise, I used to get confused. No, I'd get something that says, oh, you failed to autofocus. I go down and look to autofocus and I'm looking at the wrong computer. That one's autofocusing just fine. So just changing the colors, something that works well. Some things if you are going to send a telescope to a remote hosted facility, you need a way to turn things on and off from that facility. And those TP-Link devices will work. You need a small PC. Your mount needs to have a home position. If you have something like a HEQ5 or an HEQ6 that doesn't have a home position, then you must have a non-infrared peer camera, because if the power goes out in the middle of an imaging session in Texas and comes back on, now your scope has no idea where home is. And so with something like the AM5 and those devices that have a home position, you just rehome the scope and away you go. You'd have to use a camera in order to do that with a non-homing scope. Autofocus is essential, of course. You can do it without a flats panel and take sky flats. I tried using sky flats when I was in Arizona this year, and boy, when the conditions are changing at dusk and dawn, it's very difficult to get the number of flats that you want to take, particularly if you're using, all 7 filters. And the thing that I like to emphasize if you're thinking about going with a remote hosted facility is run the system at home the way you're going to send it to the observatory. And make sure that you've got it running be courteous to your neighbors and black out your pilot lights and try and make your system as dark as you can. And you know, if you have something go wrong and you have to walk out to your gear and fix it, then if that rig was in Texas and you had to do that, you'd be paying somebody $50 an hour to walk out to your gear and fix it. So it's probably not something that you want to do. A recent discovery, there's a website here that I found on cloudy nights where a fellow has developed a NINA log analyzer that I think is wonderful. And what you do is you go to his site and you drop your NINA log on it, and it analyzes your log and tells you what percent of the time that your sequence was running that you did various things. So this is an example of one that I ran a couple of weeks ago, and it ran for 260 minutes, and of the 260, 218 or about 84% of the time I was taking images. And so when you consider switching filters and autofocusing, they're a relatively small part of the process. So it allows you to tune your system so that you're maximizing the efficiency of taking images. We're trying to convince this fellow that he should create a NINA plugin because it's very, very helpful. Finally, some resources. If you're interested at all in these things, Patriot Astro is a wonderful source for the NINA Advanced Sequencer. And the way that I got started is that he has free downloads of advanced sequences for a number of scenarios. And so I took one of his initial templates and started with that, modified it to do what I wanted it to do, and it works really well. Queeve has a video on setting up a mini PC from A to Z, and there's a fellow Alaskan Astro who talks about how to use the advanced sequencer, and that's an extremely good video as well. Some final thoughts. Number one, you don't need an observatory to do some of these things. A secure place that you can leave your system set up and polar aligned, and you're ready to go, you can achieve quite a high degree of automation. You don't have to do it all at once, and there's a ton of help available online. And with that, thank you. I'm ready for questions. The question is, do I put my equipment away in the winter? The most recent winters since I've had the observatory, I put it away because I'm not here. So I go down to Arizona for the winter, and I won't be doing that this year, so my plan is that I'm going to leave it set up, and if I get a clear night, I'll image.
You don't have to insulate?
Nope. Nope.
How do you connect your rain sensor to NINA?
So NINA needs an ASCOM driver, and there is an ASCOM driver that works through an Arduino, and so the rain sensor connects to the Arduino, and then that connects to the ASCOM driver as a safety device. So there's also an ASCOM driver that allows you to have multiple devices, and what it does is it monitors those devices and writes to a file, and so that's what I actually use. So the Lunatico feeds into it, and the RG11 feeds into it. So either one will cause conditions to go unsafe and trigger a close. Yeah.
Very excellent presentation. I'm wondering if you're going to post it anywhere, but there's a lot of information there.
I'd be more than happy to post it somewhere. Yeah, we'll come up with a spot. Sure, sure. Good morning.
Just a suggestion where you can post it. Maybe you can do like it on YouTube.
Well, as a matter of fact, we got lots of cameras going, and that's the plan. He thinks we should put it on YouTube.
I'm not very experienced and excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I didn't do that. letter. It's like
No,
literally at
it's
the
a
end. There are
comparison
questions
between
on
new
it.
generation of
Excuse me,
Really?
new generation of digital telescope like Star and Veonis. They have a very simple mechanism. You just plug in.
yes,
It gives you a beautiful photograph.
yes,
And I'm totally inexperienced guy in
yes.
Astro Photography. So how do you compare the quality and the photograph of those?
What was the question?
So the question is, nowadays you have Veonis and you have C-Stars and you have various automatic telescopes. I think the day will eventually come where that will be probably what we all end up doing. You know, there's money to be made. The manufacturers are going to make it simpler and simpler and simpler. But at the moment, as wonderful as the images are that come out of a C-Star, they just don't compare with the images I get out of that SCA 260, for example. Yeah. What?
So, I mean, you've automated a lot of things. Do you have anything that, or plans to automate stuff for sky quality? Yes.
So the question is, are you planning to do anything to automate based on sky quality? So I do use an SQM meter. In fact, I have two SQM meters. There's one built into the Lunatico, and I have an SQM meter on one of my telescopes on the top of it, so that I'm looking at sky quality where I'm imaging as opposed to straight up overhead. And the one that's on the telescope records sky quality to my file name, so that I can sort based on sky quality. So if I had something go funny during the night, I can just quickly sort those files and toss them out.
So is that meter that you mount on your telescope is aligned with your telescope, so it's actually pointing exactly where you're...
Yeah, I mean within a degree or so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I use the Unihedron, the one that has a USB connection, as opposed to the handheld one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just record it. In Nina, you can tell it what you want to put in your file name, and SQM is one of the things goes into my file name.
Oh, very good.
Is there a way to, PhD2, you run some very high wispy clouds, PhD2 starts to have brain fart. Is there a way of saying, look, just stop, wait a couple of minutes, take another picture, if it's good, lights on, ongoing, if not, just wait a second, take another picture, lights on.
Yeah, I have not found a way to be able to do that. One of my early thoughts before I bought the Cloud Watcher was to use the lost star measure from PhD2 to say, well, the only reason it loses a star is because a cloud got in the way, and so I'll use that as my Cloud Watcher. But my programming skills weren't up to the task, so I ended up spending some money instead. But the way that I handle what you're talking about is I throw out the image where PhD2 isn't working because I get star streaks, and Nina has a trigger that restarts PhD2 after it's lost, and just keeps doing that. So you might lose 2 or 3 images.
Yeah, I don't care about that, I don't want it to sort of go, oh, I did not.
Yeah, exactly. So
I want to restart
the restart guiding trigger in Nina works. Now, there's also a wonderful new plugin in Nina called Power Ups. And it gives you some capability to do if this, then that type programming. It's far more complicated than what I would want to get into in this arena, but you can do things like that with sequencer power-ups, so that it would monitor the signal coming from PhD2 and insert a pause, and then go back and see if it's imaging again. Yeah.
What is PhD2?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, what is PhD2? So PhD2 is a guiding software. I believe it stands for Pilot Higher and Deeper. Oh yes, Push Here Dummy, that's it. Yeah. Push Here Dummy and Push Here Dummy 2. And basically it takes the signal from a guide camera and adjusts the speed of your mount to keep you centered on your target. Yeah.
One last one.
Certainly.
Have you come up with any innovations that you could patent based on?
You know, I'm fond of saying this. Things like that take a perfectly good hobby and turn it into a job. So people, have you come up with anything that you might consider patenting? So, for example, I get questions all the time about, why don't you have a little store where you sell your images? They're wonderful. No, I don't need another job. I had a perfectly good one, and now I've got a non-job, and I love it. Yeah. Thank you, folks. It's been a blast.